Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Portland debate on Measure 26-183, the ballot measure to amend the Multnomah County Charter to change from an elected to an appointed sheriff. I'm Molly Keating, representing the League, and I will be your moderator. The League of Women Voters works to help citizens make informed choices in elections. The goal of this debate is to give you information that will be helpful as you decide upon your vote. Our co-sponsors for this debate are the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, and the Links Incorporated. The Links Incorporated is a volunteer service organization of professional women of color who are committed to strengthening African American communities through public information, education, economic development, and public policy. The mission of the NAACP is to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate race-based discrimination. The mission of the League of Women Voters is to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation in government. This debate is being recorded for rebroadcast and online streaming by Metro East Community Media. Funding for the recording was provided by the Multnomah Bar Foundation. Additional funding for our voter forums is provided by Paloma Clothing. Our speakers for this debate are County Commissioner Judy Shiprack, who will be speaking in favor of the measure, and County Sheriff Mike Reese, who will speak against it. Judy Shiprack is a Multnomah County Commissioner and serves as co-chair of the local Public Safety Coordinating Council and as a representative for the Gateway Domestic Violence Center. Judy previously served as a Multnomah County Deputy District Attorney and a state representative. In the past, she directed the local Public Safety Coordinating Council, a partnership of public safety agencies working to streamline the best use of public safety resources for the county. Speaking for retaining an elected sheriff is Mike Reese. Mike began his law enforcement career with the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office in 1989 and transferred to the Portland Police Bureau in 1994. He rose through the ranks to become a precinct commander. In 2010, he was appointed Chief of Police. Last year, he came out of retirement to serve as the interim director of the Citizens Crime Commission and returned to the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office in June 2016. He was sworn in as sheriff less than 2 months ago. Measure 26-183 was placed on the ballot by the Multnomah County Charter Review Committee. If it passes, the county sheriff will no longer be elected, but instead will be appointed by the county chair with the approval of the Board of Commissioners. The sheriff would be a department head, serving at the will of the Board of Commissioners. We will begin this debate with 4-minute opening statements by each speaker, after which the speakers will answer questions. Audience questions may be written on the 3x5 index cards that volunteers are distributing. Audience members, if you have a question to ask our speakers, please signal the League member standing in the aisle for a card, print your question legibly on the card, and return it to the League member. Okay, Commissioner Shiprack, your opening statement is first, and you will have 4 minutes for this statement.
Thank you, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for providing this forum. I have a couple of concerns, and they are going to be highlighted throughout my comments. One of them is this awkward responsibility without control that currently sits with the Board of County Commissioners with regard to the conduct of the Sheriff's Office, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. And the second is our interest as a community in having the best, most highly trained, most experienced person we can find to run the most costly and one of the most hidden programs in Multnomah County, the jail. Last November, I sent a letter to the Charter Review Commission, which had newly formed. There was no scandal affecting our sheriff at the time, and my letter wasn't about the sheriff then in any case, just like my policy advocacy today isn't about Mike Reese. I said, among other things in that letter, that professional public management should be the standard. Most of the sheriff's duties focus on jail operations, More than 40,000 individuals cycle through Multnomah County's jail system each year. The level of sophistication and complexity in our jail often requires great flexibility and innovation. The jails aren't isolated institutions, but they are part of a dynamic public safety system. The sheriff's election is rarely competitive. Witness this upcoming one, hardly an example of democracy at work, where there's only one candidate. I'm not complaining about the quality of Mike Reese. I voted for his appointment. So we have right now an excellent appointed sheriff. But consider that of all the functions of the sheriff, jail administration is the most expensive, the most complex, often resulting in unanticipated overtime, and the focal point of the county's general fund budget. We consume nearly half of the discretionary spending that is available to run the jails. And consider the appointment process itself. Shortly before he resigned in disgrace, the former sheriff changed his designee to be Mike Reese. The board, which respects the designated successor tradition, appointed Mike, who is now running unopposed. And in fact, this public discussion of a subject that we disagree on is likely the most opposition that Mike is going to encounter until 2020. On the other hand, the appointment process enables other candidates than the very limited Multnomah resident population pool to apply, and it enables the creation of real criteria that pertain to the substance of a modern, effective, and efficient jail. The public safety system in Multnomah County is the envy of the nation. But like the rest of the country, we struggle with jail, being the de facto asylum for people suffering from mental illness, and that is in part represented by the overtime expenses that are generated by Suicide Watch, a 24/7 one-on-one procedure, which is just that, a procedure rather than a medical intervention, and with the racial and ethnic disparities of the entire public safety continuum reflected by disproportionate use of force against inmates of color in our jails.
Thank you. Next, we'll have the opening statement from an opponent of this measure, Sheriff Mike Reese. You also have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I first want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate and allowing us to participate. And I also want to thank Judy Shiprack for her years of service to Multnomah County. While we disagree on this issue, we have agreed on much more over our years of working together, and especially where it involves reforming our criminal justice system. And I want to thank you for your service to our community. I believe now more than ever, our top law enforcement official in Multnomah County should be an elected sheriff. Someone who lives in our community, respects the values of the communities that we serve, and knows the community well. There are a lot of challenges ahead of us, and Judy has outlined several of them. Certainly, we have public safety issues such as where homelessness and livability intersect. We have a frayed mental health system that ends up incarcerating too many of our mentally challenged folks for low-level offenses in our jail and having frequent contact with our police officers. We also have issues building trust with our communities of color. These are really challenging issues that we need an elected official to face head-on, working with other elected officials like our district attorney, our presiding court judge, the county chair, the mayor, the commissioners, and the city council, as well as our social service partners. Now, this isn't about the relationship between Mike Reese and the commissioners or the chair. To be honest, Deborah Kafori and I are kindred spirits in addressing a lot of the issues facing Multnomah County. This is about And it isn't really about the past. It's about changing the future of how we govern ourselves and giving up our voice and our right to choose an elected sheriff. Now, I'll acknowledge and understand the fact that we've had failed leadership at the sheriff's office. We've had failed leadership in other elected offices as well, at the highest level in the state and local issues as well. It's not a time for us to abandon democracy. It's a time to double down, to expect more out of our elected officials, to make sure that they are accountable to us, and that we have the right people in those leadership positions. You know, it's a time where we need to trust voters to make decisions about how they want their public safety system to work for them and to make sure that it's doing its very best. Thank you.
Thank you. In the next part of the debate, we'll ask each speaker to answer questions about the measure. They'll each have 1 minute and 15 seconds to answer each question. This first part, I have a different question for each of you. And the first is for supporter Judy Shiprack. The question: how would you structure the selection process for an appointed sheriff to make sure the chosen candidate would be a good leader of the department, even if he or she comes from out of state?
Absolutely. I appreciate that opportunity because I think a big missing part of the selection process right now, as I touched on earlier in my opening statement, is the establishment of transparent, genuine criteria that the community can agree upon, and that is the second aspect of this new process. And I acknowledge that it would be a new process, but we'll have some time to put it together because the measure doesn't take effect immediately. And that is that we would have a community engagement process to make sure that these concerns of racial and ethnic disparity and mentally ill people in our jail are handled in, again, a fully engaged community way. I think that we could increase the community participation beyond the election process that we have right now, certainly beyond the single contender on a ballot election.
Thank you. Sheriff Reese, your question: how would you address voters' concerns that in recent years, the sheriff departing under a cloud is the person who selected his successor?
Well, I want to say to that all of our county commissioners and our chair designate a successor. It's how our system of government is set up at the county. And in fact, we had the same issue come up when our chair departed and named a successor. So, you know, the sheriff's office and the position of sheriff has accountability built into it, the selection process. And there are several layers to that accountability that are really important to understand. So first and foremost, we have oversight by our chair and our county commissioners. We also have a sheriff that is required to have certification through the Department of Public Safety and Standards and Training, a department that requires high ethical standards. And if we fail there, we lose our certification and we can no longer be the sheriff. We have voters who hold us accountable. And then finally, we have the members of the organization, and we saw that last time, that they rose up, they said, we want better leadership. They went public with that and made sure that that change happened. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from our audience. Sheriff Reese, you'll have 1 minute and 15 seconds to answer. We'll trade off who starts. The question is, if the county commissioners appointed the sheriff, how would they organize their search for applicants?
Well, I think as Commissioner Shiprack just said, we're not certain how that's going to work. And I think that's one of the problems with this measure. It's really important that whoever is in charge of our public safety systems, as well as our other elected officials, knows our community, understands and respects the values of the communities here tonight, as well as everyone else. And bringing someone from outside this organization, and outside Multnomah County, bringing somebody from Washington, D.C. or somewhere else doesn't necessarily mean that that person's going to be successful working here in Multnomah County. We have to have elected leaders who respect our values and know how to lead in the setting that we have here in Multnomah County.
Thank you. Commissioner Shiprack, your answer to the same question?
Yes, I think that's a really interesting question, and I think that Sheriff Reese, your answer kind of touches on the heart of the issue itself, which is a structural issue, and that is that the sheriff sees the commissioners for a couple of weeks every year during the budget process to ask for money, and sometimes during a crisis to ask for more money. But the rest of the time, the sheriff is keeping company mainly with one group of people, and those are the corrections deputies primarily, but also the patrol deputies. And as I think I mentioned before, we have very many fewer patrol deputies now. About 90% of the work of the sheriff's office is done in corrections. So I think that what happens is that you have a bigger audience. And the campaign contributions that are made by the really special interest here, which is the employees of the sheriff's office, is something that the sheriff has to keep in mind if he wants to be reelected. So the election process itself can be a stumbling block in resolving some of these issues.
Thank you. The next question from the audience, and we'll start with Commissioner Shiprack. What counties in the U.S. have the appointed sheriff system? How has that worked for them?
Well, that's very interesting because I had the opportunity to have a chat with Jerry Abramson, who works with President Obama and who is the former mayor of Louisville, Kentucky. And Louisville is in Jefferson County, Kentucky, and they combined their city and they've done a couple of things that we have looked at and haven't been able to do here. They combined their city and their county, much like Denver, much like San Francisco. It is the city and county, Jefferson and Louisville, Kentucky. They also appoint not their sheriff, but their jail administrator. And they run a jail program, which I hate to say it, because Multnomah County has the most outstanding corrections department. Please don't get me wrong, this is not a critique of our corrections department. We have an outstanding public safety system. We're the envy of the nation. But I gotta say, I worry that Jefferson County, Kentucky, maybe has a leg up on us, and I really don't want there to be a corrections quality gap.
Thank you. To repeat the question, what counties in the U.S. have the appointed sheriff system? How has that worked for them? Sheriff Reese.
Well, I'm glad I get to respond to that because a couple of issues. One, almost no counties in the United States have an appointed sheriff. It's very, very rare. In fact, in Oregon, we have no appointed sheriffs. They're all elected. I also want to touch back on something that Commissioner Shiprack said. The sheriff's office is responsible for a very large jail system. It's only about 65% of what we do. We're a very large, complex organization that has a growing law enforcement responsibility in East County and in unincorporated parts of Multnomah County. We also do search and rescue. We also have river patrol and civil process. It's a large, complex organization. Guiding that organization requires elected leadership that is strong and stable and committed to you and the direction that you expect your sheriff's office to go. We want to be the very best at providing service to you. And you get that when you have an elected sheriff that is directly accountable to you and not filtered through another layer of bureaucracy and other elected officials who may not have as a priority public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll start the next question with Sheriff Reese. Will the appointed sheriff need to be police certified?
That's a very easy question. Yes. In Oregon, all law enforcement officials have to be certified by the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. And it's a very high standard that we go through. We're held to a high ethical standard that requires us to meet training requirements. And if there's complaints about our officers, they go through an adjudication process at the state level often. we can lose our certification when we don't behave in an ethical fashion.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Absolutely. Yes, I completely agree with Sheriff Reese. And I think that we might layer additional requirements on top of that. Again, it is an outstanding person that we're looking for. And I think that it's very different. Multnomah County is a very different county from the other 35 counties in Oregon. We are the largest. We are the most complex. And in spite of this, several other counties run a jail between them, a single jail that is the joint possession of those counties together. And those counties, because you can't have three people stumbling over each other running one jail, appoint a jail administrator to run that jail. So it is not unheard of. This is not such a radical change. And again, as I pointed out, we have a highly qualified and appointed sheriff working for us right now.
Thank you. Next question, and starting with Commissioner Shiprack. Explain why and how the way our county selects the sheriff could affect the quality and competence of the individual who is chosen.
Well, I think that Multnomah County's reputation nationally as an outstanding public safety community, as a leader in public safety standards, will assure that we would attract the most highly qualified people from around the country. I think that we have other very favorable circumstances that make people want to live here. And but for this particular role, it is the fact that we have a very highly functioning public safety coalition that makes changes, that keeps up with the most current practices in public safety, that we are evidence-based practice community, and that we have driven changes. For example, there are no bail bondsmen in Multnomah County, there are no bail bondsmen in Oregon, and that really stands out nationally. That, at the time of the change, was a major, shocking change, and we were really hanging to get rid of bail bondsmen. Like, that would destroy public safety here. And what we find now is that it has made us a much safer community.
Thank you. Sheriff Reese?
Would you repeat the question?
Yes, I was going to do that. Explain why and how the way our county selects the sheriff could affect the quality and competence of the individual who is chosen.
Well, again, with this measure, I think it opens a door for a lot of different interpretations about how this happens. And Commissioner Shiprack keeps going back to a couple of issues. One, we'll do a nationwide search and we'll bring in an expert. Well, we have experts here. And I'm really proud, as is Commissioner Shiprack, of our corrections system now. We do a lot of things right. We're one of the most respected correction systems in the United States. And the work of the men and women that protect and serve this community should be highlighted. One of the issues that we haven't talked about is that frank conversation that an elected official can have with voters and an appointed person can't. One of the concerns I have when I'm thinking about what this impact is going to be on our public safety system, I want to have, at times, an ability to have a frank conversation with you about the safety and the livability of your neighborhoods. If I have to filter that through another elected official, that frank conversation may be the last conversation I have with you if I differ with that elected official.
Thank you. Finally, each side will have 90 seconds for a closing statement, which may include a rebuttal. We'll start with the supporter, Commissioner Shiprack.
Well, thank you. Well, I think it's interesting that we've landed a little bit on what our experience has been in the past, but we haven't landed there really firmly. And I want to say that it was probably the foremost example of this relationship was Sheriff Bernie Justo, who resigned after the state DPSST recommended that he lose his badge because of numerous ethical transgressions. They're not my bosses, they're my bankers. I'm not going to debate how I spend my budget. That's why I'm independently elected. Well, that's one way to speak frankly. But that's the problem. I think that the existence of respect, I think that the ability to work together and to communicate well across the barriers of organizations has been a real issue for us. And I believe that this change will help create the communication, will help create the standard of excellence that will go on into future and will create the structure that will assure this exists for us.
Thank you. Sheriff Reese, your closing statement, 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. I'm going to throw a couple of numbers out at you. We've tried this appointment once before. 1967 to 1978, 11 and a half years, we had an appointed sheriff. We had 6 appointed sheriffs. Can you imagine the turmoil that caused in our large public safety system? It was horrific, and we went back to wisely an elected sheriff. Now, certainly we've had past failures in leadership. We've had them in other elected positions as well. I think what Commissioner Shiprack pointed out is that our system works. That democracy can be messy, but it works. And when we have elected leaders that don't meet our expectations and they don't do what we consider right and just, we have ways of removing them from office. Some of those are through voter recall efforts, but there's also other ways as well, through the DPSST, through the employees that work in the organization, through HR policies, and certainly by the oversight of the chair and the commissioners. Public safety is important. It's important to our community. It's important to the livability of our neighborhoods. I urge you, don't give up your voice and your vote on something that means so much to all of us, and that's the safety of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the time we have. Thank you to our speakers for participating in our debate. We also thank Metro East Community Media for recording and broadcasting the debate. Please check your program and consult the League's website, lwvpdx.org, for dates and times of the rebroadcasts. Our co-sponsors are the NAACP and the Links Incorporated. This program is supported by funding from the Multnomah Bar Foundation and Paloma Clothing. The League of Women Voters also produces a neutral voter's guide, which includes thorough coverage of all the state ballot measures and local city and county measures. The League's voters' guides are free and available at the county elections office in branches of Multnomah County libraries. You'll also be able to find the voter's guide online at lwvpdx.org. Once again, that's lwvpdx.org. Remember that Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Ballots will be mailed to voters on about October 20th and must be delivered to an official drop-off site anywhere in Oregon no later than 8 p.m. on Tuesday, November 8th, or mailed to arrive by that date, and postmarks do not count. The last day to register to vote is October 18th. The League's next public meeting will be November 14th at 7 o'clock p.m. here at the Multnomah County Building. The topic will be Election Methods. Is there a better way to vote? Please check our website, lwvpdx.org, for details. This is Molly Keating from the League of Women Voters of Portland. Be informed and remember that your vote is very important. Thank you for watching our debate on ballot measure 26-183. Good evening.